Why was everyone staring at her that morning in the mess hall? Maybe it was the quiet confidence in her eyes, or maybe it was because she didn't belong. Sarah Martinez had learned early what it meant to be the outsider, the one who didn't talk much, the one who worked twice as hard just to be seen half as often. She, grown up under the raw sun of West Texas, where the wind carried more dust than dreams. Her brothers wrestled, fought, built things with their hands. And she learned to keep up, because falling behind was never an option in the Martinez family. Her grandfather, James Martinez, a Vietnam veteran with a limp and a heart full of quiet lessons, had once told her, "Strength isn't about muscles, kid. It's about what you do when no one's watching." Those words stuck. They became her compass. While other girls dreamed of cheerleading or college, Sarah spent her afternoons running miles down the cracked farm roads, chasing the horizon like it owed her something. She could feel her lungs burn, the rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with the pounding of her boots. Somewhere out there, she believed, was a life big enough to match her fire. James saw it before anyone else did. He taught her how to light a fire without matches, how to read tracks in dry soil, how to move silently through the woods. But more than that, he taught her how to think when fear tried to take over. He told her about brotherhood, about sacrifice, about soldiers who carried more than rifles. They carried each other. The night she turned 16, he sat her down on the porch. The cicadas screamed in the trees. The old man looked at her with that weather-carved face and said, "You've got it in you, the kind of will that doesn't break. But this world's gonna test that, Sarah. Hard." Then he told her about the Navy SEALs, the best of the best, the warriors nobody saw until it was too late. Sarah listened like every word was oxygen. Something inside her clicked into place. That night, while the rest of her family slept, she wrote 3 words on a piece of notebook paper and taped it to her mirror. Never give up. There was one problem. Women weren't allowed in combat roles back then, let alone in the SEALs. But Sarah didn't see not allowed. She saw not yet. From that night on, her life became a mission. She woke up before sunrise, laced up her shoes, and ran 5 miles before school. Then she lifted weights in the small garage gym her father had built for her brothers. When the others laughed, she ignored them. When they whispered that she was trying to be a man, she smiled. They didn't get it. She wasn't trying to be a man. She was trying to be unbreakable. By senior year, she was a state champion wrestler and a track star. The first girl in her school's history to pin every male opponent she faced. Straight A's, flawless focus, and a quiet reputation for being unstoppable. At graduation, while her classmates took selfies and planned college parties, Sarah was filling out enlistment papers. Her mother cried. Her father stayed silent, that kind of silence that hides fear behind pride. But her grandfather stood tall beside her. His old hands trembled slightly as he said, "If anyone can do this, it's you." Boot camp was supposed to break her. It didn't. They shouted, pushed, drowned, froze, humiliated. But Sarah learned that pain had levels, and she could climb everyone. When her body screamed, her mind whispered, "Just one more step." The instructors noticed. So did the recruits. There was something unnerving about a woman who refused to be scared, refused to talk back, refused to quit. She helped others quietly, patched up their blisters, shared her energy bars, lifted logs twice her size. She didn't want to be seen as special. She wanted to be equal. Weeks turned into months, and somewhere between the drills, the 4 a.m. wake-ups, and the freezing ocean swims, a name began to echo through the barracks. Martinez. Some said it with respect, some with resentment, but everyone said it. Years later, when the Navy finally opened its combat ranks to women, Sarah was 28. 10 years of training, 10 years of proving herself, 10 years of waiting for this one chance. She applied for SEAL selection the same day the announcement came out. The tests were brutal by design. Pull-ups, mile-long swims, ocean carries, drown-proofing drills, psychological exams that tried to find your breaking point. background checks, interviews, security clearances. When the acceptance email came, Sarah didn't scream, didn't cry. She just sat there, hands trembling, breathing in disbelief. Then she picked up her phone and called one person. Her grandfather. The old man's voice cracked through the receiver. "You did it, kid. But this next part, this'll be the fight of your life." She smiled through tears. "That's what you trained me for." That night she went outside, barefoot in the cool Texas grass, and looked up at the stars. The same ones she'd stared at as a girl. For the first time, she felt like they were looking back. Coronado, California. The gate to hell, or heaven, depending on how you handled it. She arrived before dawn, the ocean hidden behind fog, the smell of salt and diesel in the air. She carried nothing but a small duffel bag, her orders, and the kind of determination that made people uncomfortable. Every eye followed her as she stepped onto the compound. 43 candidates, all men and one woman. The instructors didn't bother hiding their skepticism. Chief Petty Officer Mike Rodriguez, a tattooed veteran with arms like cables and a stare that could cut through steel, looked at her name tag, then at her face. "You know where you are, Martinez?" "Yes, Chief." "You know how many people quit this course?" "Most of them, Chief." He nodded slowly. "Good, at least you've done your homework." The first week was designed to destroy illusions. Wake up at 4:30. Ocean swim in freezing water. Sprints in wet sand that swallowed boots whole. Log carries until your shoulders screamed. Sarah had trained for the cold, taken ice baths in her garage, but the Pacific was a different kind of monster, sharp, merciless, endless. The salt bit at her skin. The cold clawed at her lungs, but she never surfaced early. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3, stay down, stay calm. Some nights she dreamed of fire instead of water, of her grandfather's hands showing her how to start a flame with flint and patience. It reminded her that even the smallest spark could survive the storm. By the second week, the instructors turned psychological. They broke down the loud ones first, the cocky, the arrogant. Sarah wasn't any of those. They shouted in her face, told her she didn't belong, told her she was taking a man's slot. One afternoon, Chief Rodriguez called her out in front of everyone. "Martinez, step up." Her boots hit the sand with a dull thud. "You think you belong here," he barked. "You think carrying a few logs and doing push-ups makes you one of us. You're a distraction, that's all, a headline." Silence, dozens of eyes on her. Sweat, sand, heartbeat in her ears. "I'm not going anywhere, Chief," she said quietly. Rodriguez stared for a long moment, then nodded once. "We'll see." Later, he admitted he wasn't trying to make her quit. He just needed to know what kind of fire she carried. By week 3, half the candidates had rung the bell, 3 rings that meant "I'm done." The sound haunted the camp. Every time it echoed, Sarah felt 2 things at once, sorrow for them and defiance for herself. She learned to live in that space between exhaustion and purpose. She learned to fight the voice that whispered quit. During pool training, a recruit named Jackson panicked underwater. He thrashed, bubbles rising, seconds from blacking out. The instructors hadn't noticed. Sarah did. She dove down, pulled him up, kept his airway clear until he coughed and gasped for air. Later, Rodriguez pulled her aside. "You risked your set to save him." "He's part of the team, Chief." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's what makes a SEAL." The bond among the remaining recruits deepened. They stopped seeing her as a headline and started seeing her as a teammate, someone who bled, hurt, and pushed the same as they did. But friendship couldn't save them from what came next. Hell Week. Sunday midnight. The air horn shattered the silence. The barracks exploded in chaos, buckets of ice water, shouting, blinding lights. Candidates stumbled half awake into the cold. They had 90 seconds to form up. Sarah was already outside, boots laced, gear on, calm. The first exercise was a 14-mile run down the beach with waves slapping at their legs and wind cutting through soaked uniforms. Jeeps followed beside them, instructors yelling, hurling insults, spraying water. The sand turned to mud, the night to endless gray. The only constant was the sound of their own breathing. Beside her ran Martinez from New Mexico, no relation, just coincidence. He was her closest ally now. When he began to slow, gasping, Sarah adjusted her pace. "You stop, I stop," she told him. "Don't," he rasped, "go." She didn't team before self. That was the rule. By dawn, the ocean swallowed them again, freezing, violent, merciless. Linked arms, heads barely above water, teeth chattering so hard they sounded like gunfire. Some men broke, some cried. Sarah's lips turned blue, but she sang softly through the shaking, a half-remembered tune her grandfather used to whistle. It wasn't about melody. It was about rhythm. Survive this minute, then the next. Sleep became a rumor. In 5 days they'd get 4 hours, maybe. By Tuesday morning more bells rang. Strong men, bigger than her, smarter, faster, done. Their dreams ended in the soft clang of brass. Sarah stayed. Wednesday night brought the surf torture, the drown zone. They lay shoulder to shoulder in the waves for 6 hours. Hypothermia was always close. One by one, medics pulled men out. Martinez began shaking uncontrollably, his words slurred. She shifted her body to block the wind, whispered to him, kept him talking, kept him here. Later, he told her she'd saved his life. By Thursday night, only 9 remained. Faces hollow, eyes glazed, bodies trembling. But they were still standing or crawling. The final march was 20 kilometers with full gear. Sarah's shoulders bled raw beneath the straps. Her feet blistered open. Every step felt borrowed. Yet when she saw the flag in the distance, the finish line of Hell Week, something inside her caught fire again. She thought of her grandfather, of all the whispers that said she couldn't. And then she crossed it. Chief Rodriguez waited there. For once he was smiling, not the cruel grin of a drill instructor, a real smile. "Welcome to the other side, Martinez." Her knees buckled, the world tilted. She laughed, a broken, exhausted, disbelieving laugh, and for the first time she let herself cry. They had survived Hell Week, but she knew it was only the beginning. When she finally lay down that night, waves whispering beyond the window, she remembered her grandfather's words one last time. Strength isn't about muscles. It's about what you do when no one's watching. And there, in the silence after victory, she realized he'd been right all along. Because real strength doesn't shout. It endures. What comes after surviving hell? For Sarah, it wasn't rest, it was silence. The kind that fills the air after chaos. The kind that forces you to hear your own thoughts again. When Hell Week ended, the survivors, 9 of them, were ghosts of who they'd been. Their eyes hollow, their bodies trembling, their spirits torn and rebuilt in equal measure. Every one of them had earned the right to be there. And yet, none of them knew if they could survive what came next. The instructors didn't congratulate them. There were no speeches, no medals, no pats on the back. Just a short, quiet line from Chief Rodriguez as he walked past them. Hell Week over, the war's just beginning. Sarah didn't understand it then, but she would. The next phase of SEAL training wasn't about breaking the body. It was about shaping the mind. She woke before dawn every day, not because she had to, but because she couldn't sleep. The rhythm of ocean waves outside her bunk was too close to the sound of the surf. She'd nearly frozen in. Her dreams were filled with water, darkness, and the metallic clang of that damned bell. But in daylight, she moved like a machine. Weapon drills, explosives, communications, medical aid, underwater navigation. Every skill had to be perfect, precise, instinctive. The smallest mistake could cost lives in the field. Sarah learned to build and disarm charges, calculate detonation ranges, identify shrapnel patterns. She treated every assignment like it was real, because one day it would be. The instructors noticed her focus. Chief Rodriguez watched quietly as she carried out tasks that left others shaking their heads. When she finished assembling a C4 charge faster than anyone else in her group, he said nothing. But later that night, she found a note taped to her locker. "Speed is nothing without control." She smiled. It wasn't praise, it was respect. The underwater phase was the hardest. It tested her claustrophobia, her patience, and her lungs. They were taught to swim blind, to navigate in pitch-black conditions with nothing but a compass and a sense of distance. The ocean became her enemy and her teacher. It punished every hesitation, every shallow breath. But it also taught her how to move with calm precision, how to trust her instincts in total darkness. One night during a training dive, Sarah's partner's air hose got tangled. He started to panic, jerking violently, his mask flooding. The easy choice would have been to signal for rescue divers. The right choice meant staying. She stayed. Hands steady, she freed the line, shared her air, and guided him to the surface. The instructors debriefed them after, stone-faced. "Next time," one said, "if you die saving him, you fail." Sarah met his eyes. "If I don't try, I fail myself." He didn't respond, but Rodriguez's lips twitched, almost a smile. Weeks turned into months. The recruits became something more than soldiers. They became ghosts in training, masters of silence, precision, and endurance. Sarah excelled in languages, Arabic, Spanish, and was pushed into advanced intelligence training. She learned how to read people, how to lie without flinching, how to extract truth from silence. She'd sit in the small interrogation rooms for hours, pretending to be calm as the instructors tried to break her. They deprived her of sleep, blasted noise into the room, whispered lies about her teammates. Martinez already talked. "Your mission failed. You're alone." But she'd remember her grandfather's voice in her head. The mind is a muscle, too. And she'd start reciting old poems under her breath, or solving math problems in her head to keep sane. When the drill ended after 18 hours, the instructor leaned close and whispered, "You're harder to crack than most men I've trained." Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Somewhere in those months, she became a soldier the world would never meet, but would owe everything to. Her favorite part of training was the medical program. The irony wasn't lost on her, that a killer had to be a healer too. Dr. Patricia Williams, a former flight surgeon, led the course. She'd seen real combat, patched up soldiers under fire, and lost more patients than she cared to remember. She liked Sarah immediately. "You've got good hands," Williams said one afternoon after Sarah stabilized a simulated gunshot wound faster than any candidate before her. "Quick, but gentle. That's rare." Sarah shrugged. "I just don't want anyone dying on my watch." Williams studied her for a long time. "That's not always up to you." Those words stuck. During a rappelling exercise a few weeks later, one of the recruits, Thompson, slipped and fell hard. His leg twisted unnaturally, and his neck hit a rock as he tumbled. The instructors froze the drill. Sarah didn't. She rushed to him, checked his pulse, stabilized his spine, called for a stretcher. Her calm precision under pressure probably saved him from paralysis. Later, Williams told her, "That's what separates the good from the great." Sarah didn't feel great, she just felt human. By the time she neared the end of the SEAL qualification course, her name had spread quietly through the ranks. The woman who didn't break, the one who lifted others without saying much. Even those who doubted her in the beginning began to see her differently. Respect replaced skepticism. Admiration replaced awkward silence. When she wasn't training, she'd write short letters home, not about missions or drills, but about small things. The sound of the ocean, the way sand stuck to her boots, how she missed Texas sunsets. She never mentioned how often she'd bled through those boots, or the way her hands trembled at night from exhaustion. Some truths didn't fit on paper. The final test came quietly. A simulated hostage rescue. Full-scale, real weapons, real stakes, minus the bullets. Sarah was chosen to lead. Her team moved through mock buildings under floodlights. Every corner could hold an ambush. Every decision could mean the difference between mission success and total failure. Halfway through, the scenario changed without warning. The hostage they were rescuing pulled a gun, a hidden instructor testing her adaptability. Sarah's reflexes took over. One clean, calculated motion. She disarmed him, neutralized the threat, and finished the mission with 0 casualties. When it ended, Rodriguez called her into his office. He didn't stand behind the desk like usual. He sat across from her. "I've seen a lot of candidates come through this program," he said quietly. "Most don't make it, some survive it, a few redefine it." Sarah stayed silent. "You've got what we call quiet leadership, the kind that doesn't need to shout." He leaned back. "That's rare, Martinez, don't lose it." That night she stood alone on the beach. The stars reflected on the black water like distant gunfire. She thought about everything she'd lost: sleep, comfort, friends who'd rung the bell. But also everything she'd found: purpose, trust, family of a different kind. When graduation came, the ceremony was small, almost humble. Families gathered under the California sun. Rows of crisp uniforms, medals glinting like captured light. Sarah's parents flew in from Texas. Her brothers stood tall, pride written all over their faces. Her mother cried again, but this time it was different. When Chief Rodriguez pinned the trident to her uniform, Sarah's throat tightened. That small gold emblem weighed more than metal. It was pain, endurance, sacrifice, all forged into one symbol. After the ceremony, Dr. Williams approached her with an envelope. "There's a team that needs someone like you," she said. "Highly classified, overseas work, you'll be gone a long time, no credit, no headlines." Sarah looked at the envelope. No insignia, no details, just a code number. "What kind of missions?" Williams gave a half-smile. "The kind that never happened." That night Sarah sat by the window of her small dorm room, holding the envelope. The waves crashed outside, endless, familiar. She thought of her grandfather, his stories, his belief in her. He passed away a few months earlier. He never got to see this day, but she could almost hear his voice in the wind. "You wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, didn't you?" Yes, that was always the point. So she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A destination. A name. A mission. 3 days later, she was on a transport plane somewhere over the Atlantic. No rank, no flag, just a new identity and a silence that felt heavier than the gear on her back. She was now part of something smaller than the Navy, but larger than herself. A special operations unit that didn't exist on paper. 12 members. 1 woman. Commander David Chin led them, 25 years in the field, calm, analytical, with eyes that saw through lies. He shook her hand when she arrived. "I asked for you personally." "Why?" "Because sometimes," he said, "the strongest soldier isn't the loudest." The team didn't speak much that first day. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything: earn your place. Sarah unpacked her gear, checked her weapon, and looked around at the men who would become her brothers in arms. Every scar, every glance carried history. That night she lay awake on her bunk, listening to the steady hum of the base generators. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. She was ready. She didn't know what the next mission would demand of her, how far it would push her, or what it would cost. But one truth burned clear in her mind. She had already been through hell. Everything else was just weather. And as dawn began to bleed across the sky, painting the horizon in gold and gray, Sarah whispered into the quiet, "I'm ready, Grandpa. Let's see how far this goes. The world outside the base was waking up, unaware that somewhere out there, a woman who wasn't supposed to exist was preparing to change it. The first thing she learned about covert missions was that silence had a sound. It wasn't absence, it was pressure. A slow, invisible weight that settled behind your ribs, reminding you that one wrong breath could end everything. Sarah sat inside a dim operations room, the hum of projectors and computers blending into the low murmur of voices. On the screen before her, satellite images flickered, grainy, real, deadly. The target, a terrorist stronghold in the Middle East. The objective, extract an American diplomat taken hostage 3 months earlier. The timeline, 72 hours. Commander Chen stood at the front of the room, his tone steady, his words clipped. This isn't a war zone, it's a fortress. Every wall, every rooftop, every alleyway is guarded. Local forces already tried twice. Both times they lost men. We don't get a third chance. Sarah studied the layout on the screen. The compound sat on the edge of a desert town, crumbling walls, a single entry gate, multiple choke points. The hostage was being kept underground, in a bunker directly below the main building. Chen continued, "Our way in is her." All eyes turned to Sarah. Her stomach tightened. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it out loud was different. Chen stepped closer. "Intel confirms one of the cell leaders was injured in a recent bombing. He's refusing treatment from local doctors. That's our window. Martinez will go in as a civilian medic, alone. She'll assess his condition, gain access to the building, confirm the hostage's location, and signal us when it's clear to move." Someone exhaled sharply at the back of the room. "That's suicide." Chen didn't look back, so is hesitation. Sarah kept her eyes forward. She'd been trained for this: disguise, infiltration, communication under pressure. But training and reality were two different beasts. Her heart pounded against the stillness. A medic, alone, inside a compound full of men who'd kill her on sight if they knew who she was. When the briefing ended, Chen approached her quietly. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. She met his gaze. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to bring someone home." He nodded once, then packed light. That night she sat alone in her quarters, the mission file spread across the desk. Every photo, every translation, every name. She memorized patrol schedules, weapon types, the hierarchy of command. But when she turned a page and saw the hostage's photograph, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a forced smile, something inside her twisted. He had a family, a wife, 2 kids, a wedding ring still visible on his finger in the photo. This wasn't a theoretical rescue. This was someone's father. The next day, her transformation began. Skin darkened with special pigmentation cream. Hair dyed, eyes lined with kohl. Traditional robes concealing her athletic frame. A headscarf that shadowed her face. When she looked in the mirror, Sarah Martinez was gone. What stared back was Dr. Samira Al-Nuri, a regional field medic fluent in Arabic, trained in emergency trauma care. She practiced her accent for hours, until even she couldn't hear the American beneath it. But just as she began to feel ready, her phone buzzed. An encrypted message. "Home." Her mother's voice shaking over the secure line. "Sarah, your father's in the hospital. Heart attack, it's bad." The world tilted, her throat went dry. "Is he?" "He's stable," her mother interrupted. "But the doctors don't know. You need to come home." Sarah closed her eyes. The briefing room replayed in her mind. The hostage's face, the clock ticking down. She whispered, "Mom, I can't, not yet." Her mother's silence on the line hurt more than any bullet could have. "You always have an excuse," she said, voice breaking. "Always a mission. Always someone else's life before your own." The call ended. Sarah stared at the black screen, her reflection fractured by tears she didn't have time to shed. Duty and family, Honor and love. The same war, different battlefield. When she reported back to Commander Chen, her voice didn't tremble. "I'm ready." He looked at her. Maybe he knew what had just happened, maybe not. But all he said was, "Then Godspeed." The journey to the target zone was disguised as a humanitarian transport. 2 trucks carrying medical supplies. One of them held her. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, sandstorms blurring the horizon. Inside the truck, she sat among crates of bandages and IV bags, every bump in the road jolting through her body. By the time they reached the outskirts of the compound, the sun was a dying ember behind the dunes. She took a breath, adjusted her scarf, and stepped out into the heat. 2 armed guards approached immediately, rifles raised. One barked in Arabic, demanding identification. She answered in their dialect, calm, controlled, slipping easily into character. "You called for a doctor. I'm here for the injured." The guard eyed her papers, suspicious but uncertain. Behind him, another man, older with a scar across his cheek, nodded. "Let her in." As she walked through the gate, her pulse spiked. The smell of sweat, diesel, and gun oil hung heavy in the air. Inside, men watched her with the curiosity reserved for outsiders, and the danger reserved for prey. She kept her eyes down, her pace steady, her mind cataloging everything. Number of guards, weapon types, positions, escape routes. A voice barked behind her, "Here, the commander." They led her into a room dimly lit by a single bulb. On a cot lay the wounded man, a terrorist leader known as Hassan Qureshi. His arm was wrapped in stained bandages, infection spreading up to his shoulder. Sarah forced herself to breathe evenly. She could smell the decay. "Remove your veil," he ordered in Arabic. She hesitated just long enough to seem modest, not defiant, then pulled it back. He stared at her. "You are not local." "My family fled here from Basra," she said quickly. "I studied medicine in Damascus." He grunted, wincing as she peeled back the bandage. Pus oozed from the wound. She kept her hands steady. "This will hurt," she warned. He chuckled weakly. "Pain is a friend of men like me." She cleaned the wound carefully, real treatment mixed with deception. As she worked, her eyes darted around the room. She spotted a staircase through a half-open door leading downward, guards posted nearby. The basement. Her heart skipped. That was it. That had to be where the hostage was held. She needed proof, but she couldn't move yet. So she talked, asked questions, listened, recorded subtle details through the microphone hidden in her stethoscope. Every second was data, every breath was danger. When the treatment was done, she stood, bowing her head. "You'll need another session tomorrow to prevent infection." He waved her off. "You'll return." Outside, a guard grabbed her arm. "You stay tonight. Commander may need you again." She froze. That wasn't in the plan. Her radio implant crackled faintly in her ear, Chen's voice, whispering across the distance. "Copy. Hold position. We've got your signal. Don't move until 300. She muttered a silent curse under her breath. Understood. They locked her in a small side room with a mat, a pitcher of water, and one barred window. The walls smelled of mildew and oil. She sat in the dark, heartbeat echoing like footsteps. Every instinct screamed run, but she couldn't, not yet. Hours passed. The compound settled into the restless silence of night. Through the thin walls she could hear muffled voices, laughter, arguments, prayers, and below it all a faint sound. A cough. A man's voice, weak, American. The hostage. Her eyes welled with sudden heat. He was alive. At exactly 03:00, a small vibration pulsed against her wrist, a timed signal from her watch. The operation had begun. She slipped out through the small window, landing silently in the sand. Moving low, she crept toward the basement entrance. The guards were drowsy, one half asleep against the wall. 2 quick steps, A precise strike to the carotid, silent collapse. The second turned too late, a flash of motion, the edge of her tranquilizer dart embedding just below his collarbone. He slumped. She slid down the stairs. The air grew colder, the smell thicker. At the end of the corridor, a locked door. She picked it quickly, her fingers remembering every second of training. The light inside was dim, flickering. The hostage sat chained, his eyes hollow. When he saw her, confusion crossed his face. Who are you?" he rasped. She knelt, cutting the restraints. "I'm with the Navy. I'm here to take you home." He stared, disbelief and relief colliding in his expression. "You're American." She smiled faintly. "That's our secret." Above them, shouting erupted. Gunfire, the team had breached. "Move," she hissed. They sprinted through the corridors, bullets tearing through the plaster. Her earpiece crackled. "Extraction point East Gate, 2 minutes." They burst into the open. Searchlights cut through the darkness. Sarah pushed the hostage behind cover, returning fire in controlled bursts. The air filled with sand and smoke. A round grazed her shoulder, burning hot. She ignored it. Pain was noise, focus was survival. Chen's voice came through, urgent. "We've got you on visual, 30 meters out." Sarah grabbed the hostage's arm. "Stay low, run when I run." They dashed across the final stretch as an explosion ripped through the compound. The shockwave knocked her off balance, but Chen's hand caught her, pulling her into the truck. "Go, go, go." The vehicle roared to life, wheels spinning against sand. Bullets pinged off the steel as they sped into the desert. Inside, the hostage collapsed, shaking uncontrollably. Sarah tore open a med kit, checking his vitals, her own blood mixing with his. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You're safe now." For the first time that night, she let herself breathe. Chen sat across from her, his face streaked with dust, eyes unreadable. "You did good, Martinez." She didn't answer. She just stared out the back of the truck as the flames of the compound faded into the distance. Somewhere in those flames burned the old version of herself, the one who needed to prove something. What remained now was quieter, harder, truer. When they landed back at base hours later, the dawn light washed over them like absolution. The hostage was alive. The mission was a success. Sarah walked to the edge of the airstrip, blood-stained, trembling but still upright. She looked east toward home. Her father was still in the hospital. Her mother still didn't understand, but she whispered softly to the wind, "Please tell him I made it." Sometimes, she thought, victory doesn't feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like loss that didn't win. As the engines roared behind her and the sun climbed over the horizon, Sarah realized something simple, something she would carry for the rest of her life. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The medal came in a plain box. No ribbon, no ceremony. Just a small bronze emblem and a note that said, "For exceptional conduct under fire." Sarah stared at it for a long time. She wasn't sure what bothered her more, that the box looked too small to hold what it represented, or that it came without a face, without a voice, without meaning. The hostage she saved had gone home. His wife had sent her a letter that she wasn't allowed to keep. Classified. Everything she touched disappeared behind black ink and locked files. That was the rule of her world. Succeed, then vanish. For 2 weeks after the mission, she stayed on base, her arm in a sling, the wound clean but throbbing. Every morning she woke before dawn, habit refusing to die. She'd sit outside the infirmary, coffee cooling in her hand, watching the sun crawl over the desert like it was learning to rise again. Sometimes Commander Chen joined her. He'd stand beside her in silence, both of them pretending it wasn't strange to say nothing. "You should take leave," he finally said one morning. "I'm fine." That wasn't a suggestion. He handed her a folded slip of paper. 3 weeks home. She wanted to argue, but part of her knew she needed to see what home even meant anymore. Texas hadn't changed much. Same cracked roads, same leaning fences, same dry wind humming through the grass. But the people had. Her brothers were older, her mother grayer. And her father, thin, pale, hooked up to quiet machines, smiled when she walked into the hospital room. "You finally showed up," he whispered, voice soft as paper. Sarah laughed quietly. "You didn't make it easy, old man." He squeezed her hand, weak but steady. "You always were the stubborn one." They didn't talk about the missions, or the wars, or the secrecy. They talked about barbecue and football and the old oak tree that finally fell in the storm last year. For 3 days, she let herself forget. No guns, no orders, no silence that weighed like guilt. On the 4th day, she found herself running again, 5 miles through the outskirts of town, lungs burning in the dry air. The world didn't know what she carried inside, and maybe that was a mercy. Her mother watched her from the porch that evening. "You look tired," she said softly, "not the kind that sleep fixes." Sarah didn't answer, because her mother was right. When she returned to base, something in the air had shifted. Commander Chen was waiting in the hangar. No briefing room, no files, just him, his expression unreadable. "How's your father?" he asked. "Alive." "That's good," a pause, "because this next one won't wait." He handed her a new folder, stamped in red, classified Priority 1. The mission was different, colder, more human. A journalist named Lisa Peterson had been kidnapped while investigating human trafficking routes in Southeast Asia. Intelligence suggested a connection between the traffickers and a terror network the Navy had been tracking for years. Her photo stared up at Sarah from the file, a woman with kind eyes and a brave smile. Someone who believed truth could change the world. Sarah exhaled. "They want me undercover again." Chen nodded. "You'll pose as one of the victims. They're moving people across borders disguised as migrant workers. You'll get in through the same channel. No weapons. No comms once inside. Extraction after confirmation." Sarah closed the folder. "And if I don't confirm?" Chen didn't blink. "Then you don't come back." He let the silence stretch, then added softer, "You don't have to take it." But they both knew she would. Preparation was quick, brutal, and quiet. The disguise wasn't makeup this time, it was exhaustion. They stripped away everything that made her look like a soldier. The straight posture, the steady gaze, the control. She practiced the role until it sank into her bones. A runaway named Amira, desperate, afraid, with nothing left to lose. When she looked in the mirror, even she didn't recognize herself. Before she left, Dr. Williams found her outside the infirmary. The older woman placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can't save everyone, Sarah. Not in this line of work." Sarah gave a thin smile. "Doesn't mean I shouldn't try." Williams sighed. "That's what makes you good, and what'll break you if you're not careful." The air in the border town was heavy with dust and diesel. The streets were narrow, crowded with vendors and children who didn't look up when soldiers passed. Sarah walked among them, head down, a small satchel slung over her shoulder. She met her contact, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, near a bus station. The woman scanned her quickly, then murmured, "You want passage, no questions." Sarah nodded, "No questions." They boarded an old truck that smelled of gasoline and fear. 10 other women sat inside, young, silent, eyes hollow. Each carried a story the world would never read. Hours passed. The road turned rough, winding through jungle and dirt until there was no sound but the engine and the occasional cry of an animal. By nightfall, they reached a compound surrounded by corrugated metal and armed men. Her pulse slowed deliberately. She was inside. The guards barked orders, pushing the women into small, overcrowded rooms. No beds, no light, just a bucket and walls that held the echoes of too many nights like this. Sarah stayed quiet, watching, counting. 3 guards per door, cameras, no obvious exits. Her training told her to observe. Her heart told her to intervene. But if she broke cover too soon, everyone would die. So she waited. For 3 days she lived as one of them, ate their food, slept on the concrete floor, pretended to be helpless, and all the while she memorized faces, routines, guards, rotations. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the heat, it was the crying. The youngest was maybe 14. She had eyes too old for her face. Sarah whispered to her one night, "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, "Layla." "Don't be afraid, Layla. Someone's coming for you." The girl frowned. "Who?" Sarah looked toward the ceiling where the faint hum of surveillance cameras buzzed. "Someone who's been here before." On the third night, she overheard 2 guards talking near the corridor. "The American woman," one said. "She's still alive in the North Wing." "Peterson." Sarah's chest tightened. She waited until midnight, then pretended to faint, using the moment of chaos to slip into the hallway. She moved like a shadow, bare feet, shallow breaths, every sense stretched to breaking. The North Wing was darker, colder. The smell of bleach and sweat stung her eyes. She found the door unlocked. Inside, a woman sat chained to a chair, her head bowed. When Sarah whispered her name, the woman flinched. "Lisa Peterson." The journalist raised her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Who are you?" "Your way out." Lisa's voice cracked. You're American." Sarah nodded. "Keep your voice down, we leave tonight." But the journalist shook her head. "They'll kill everyone if they find us." Sarah crouched beside her. "They won't find us." It wasn't bravado, it was faith. The same kind that had carried her through Hell Week, through war zones, through her own doubts. She freed Lisa's hands with a stolen key, her fingers trembling not from fear but urgency. "Can you walk?" "Barely." "Then lean on me." They slipped through the corridor, each step measured, every heartbeat a countdown. At the gate, 2 guards appeared from the shadows. Sarah didn't hesitate. One strike to the throat, a sweep to the knee, silence before sound. They made it to the outer fence just as floodlights snapped on. Voices shouted in the distance. "Run," she whispered. They sprinted across the dirt, bullets tearing through the night behind them. Sarah fired once, twice, controlled bursts that bought them seconds. A truck waited half a mile out, headlights off, engine running. As they neared, she felt a sharp sting in her leg. She stumbled but kept moving, dragging Lisa with her. Chen's voice broke through the radio, now active in her wristband. "Visual confirmed. 2 inbound. Copy." She gasped between breaths. "Copy. Package secured." Hands reached out from the dark. Her team. They pulled them both into the truck, the doors slamming shut as gunfire echoed from behind. The engine roared to life, carrying them toward the border and out of hell. Inside, Sarah tore open a field kit, wrapping her leg, checking Lisa's pulse. The woman clutched her hand weakly. You saved me." Sarah looked at her. "No, you saved yourself, I just showed up." For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe deeply. The air smelled of oil and freedom. But beneath the relief was something heavier, a quiet grief for those they couldn't save, for the girls left behind. She stared out the back window as the compound disappeared into the black horizon. "Next time," she whispered, "I'll come back." Back at base, the debrief was short, classified, efficient. Peterson was alive, recovering safe. The traffickers had been dismantled in a coordinated strike days later, based on Sarah's intel. Her name wouldn't appear in any report. Her face wouldn't appear in any photo, but her work had saved hundreds. After the meeting, Chen found her outside, leaning against a jeep, leg bandaged, eyes distant. "You did it again," he said. "Feels like I didn't do enough." He studied her for a long time. "That's what makes you dangerous, Martinez. You never think it's enough." She looked up at the sky, endless, pale, unforgiving. "Someone has to." He didn't argue, because he knew she was right. Later that night, alone in her bunk, she pulled a small object from her pocket, the same bronze medal in its plain box. She turned it over in her hand. It caught the light faintly, a small shimmer in the dark. She placed it on the nightstand beside her and whispered, half to herself, half to the memory of her grandfather. Strength isn't about surviving, it's about who you save when you do. They told her to rest. But soldiers like Sarah didn't know what that meant anymore. 2 weeks after the rescue mission, she was cleared for limited duty. No operations, no field work, just advisory support. That meant a desk, a file cabinet, and too much time to think. The base had changed, or maybe she had. Everything sounded different: footsteps in the hallway, the clatter of trays in the mess hall, even the wind against the metal hangers. It all seemed louder, sharper, like the world was trying to remind her it was still spinning, even if she was. Every night she woke drenched in sweat, half expecting to hear gunfire. Every morning she put on her uniform anyway. Commander Chen didn't question it, he knew better. "Sit in on the new class," he said one morning, handing her a roster. "Fresh candidates, recruits from multiple branches. You'll observe, advise, maybe teach a few." Sarah raised a brow. "Teach what?" He shrugged. "How to survive what they can't imagine." The training field was alive again. The crack of rifle fire, the bark of commands, the steady rhythm of boots against dirt. It smelled like sweat, oil, and youth, a mix of fear and ambition. Sarah watched from a distance as the recruits ran drills. Some looked sharp, others barely keeping pace. Among them, one stood out, a young woman with auburn hair tied tight, her movements crisp but anxious. When the exercise ended, the recruits gathered for feedback. Sarah approached quietly, her presence drawing curious glances. The auburn-haired recruit straightened first, eyes wide. "Ma'am," she said, voice trembling slightly. Sarah studied her for a moment. "What's your name?" "Reed, ma'am, private first class." "How old are you, Reed?" 21. "Why are you here?" Reed hesitated. "My brother was Navy, he didn't come back." Sarah nodded slowly. "And you think following his path will bring you closer to him?" Reed swallowed. "It's all I know how to do." There was a silence between them, the kind filled not with judgment but understanding. Sarah broke it softly. "Then listen carefully. The uniform doesn't bring you closer to anyone, it just shows you what they carried." Reed blinked, unsure how to respond. "Keep your head down," Sarah added, "not in fear, in focus." From that day on, Reed followed her everywhere. Not officially, not as a student or subordinate, just in orbit, watching, learning, trying to understand what made the quiet woman with the steady eyes move the way she did. A week later, Sarah was assigned to run a stress simulation for the recruits, a night operation designed to mimic combat panic. Low light, loud noises, smoke, controlled chaos. She watched from the control booth as they moved through the maze, heart rate spiking, decisions faltering. Reed was in the second group, calm at first. Then a sudden explosion of noise sent the team scattering. Reed froze, breath quick, eyes unfocused. Sarah pressed the intercom. "Breathe, Reed, 1 second at a time." Reed blinked, grounding herself, then moved again, slower but steady. When the exercise ended, she found Sarah outside. "How do you do it?" she asked quietly. "How do you stay calm when everything's falling apart?" Sarah smiled faintly. "You don't, you just make peace with the noise." Reed frowned. "That's not in the manual." "It never is." That night Sarah stayed late, reviewing footage from the drills. Her eyes weren't on the recruits, they were on herself. The way she observed from distance, the way her hands trembled slightly whenever a loud sound hit the speakers. Dr. Williams called it residual stress response. Sarah called it memory. When she closed her eyes, she still saw the girls she couldn't save. The compound burning, the way the air smelled of gunpowder and guilt. She'd tell herself it wasn't her fault, and maybe that was true, but guilt doesn't care about truth. Sometimes it just needs a place to live. One evening, Chen called her into his office. No papers, no screens, just him, sitting in the dim light with a file she hadn't seen before. "Remember I told you that rescue in Southeast Asia had layers," he said. Sarah frowned. Layers. The trafficking network we hit, it wasn't isolated. We found connections to Europe, a buyer list, private interests, some military. She stiffened. Military. He nodded. "We can't prove anything yet, but it's bad, and we're sending a small team to dig deeper. No weapons, just information." Sarah tilted her head. "You want me in?" "I want you leading it." She exhaled. "That's not advisory duty." He met her eyes. "No, it's justice duty." 3 days later, she was on a plane again. Destination, Bucharest. Cover, Liaison Officer for Humanitarian Operations. The city was cold, gray, full of secrets that didn't want to be found. She met her contact, a local intelligence agent named Victor Ionescu. Sharp eyes, steady demeanor, too polite to be trustworthy. He slid a photograph across the cafe table. "This man," he said, "Colonel Pavel Dragovic, former logistics officer, now runs security for a private contractor. We believe he facilitated shipments of trafficked civilians disguised as cargo." Sarah studied the photo, a man in his 50s, clean suit, stone expression. The kind of face that had seen too much and cared too little. "What's the catch?" she asked. Victor smiled faintly. "He's protected by money and by fear." That night, Sarah walked the streets alone, scarf pulled high against the wind. The city felt haunted, the kind of place where history whispered through cracked bricks and broken windows. She found Dragovic's office building easily. Marble lobby, private guards, mirrored glass. She walked in like she belonged there. Inside, she introduced herself as a UN field consultant, speaking fluent Romanian. Her confidence was her disguise. Dragovic greeted her with a measured smile. "To what do I owe this pleasure, Ms. Martinez?" She didn't flinch. "I'm here to discuss your humanitarian logistics records." He laughed softly. "You make it sound like a confession." "Maybe it is," she said quietly. The conversation was polite, professional, and dangerous. Every sentence was a move, every glance a test. But beneath his composure, Sarah saw something, a flicker of discomfort when she mentioned the compound's coordinates. He knew. He was connected. As she stood to leave, he said, "Be careful, Ms. Martinez. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered." Her pulse quickened. Then maybe they shouldn't exist. That night someone followed her back to her hotel, footsteps in the rain, a shadow reflected in glass. She pretended not to notice, unlocking her door casually, but her hand was already near the weapon concealed in her boot. Inside she waited, silence stretched, then a faint creak of the floor behind her. She moved fast, one turn, one strike. The figure hit the wall hard, knife clattering to the floor. It was Victor. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed. He raised his hands, "Testing your instincts." "Next time," she said coldly, "don't." He smiled. "Good, you'll need them. Dragovic isn't alone, there's someone higher." Sarah's jaw clenched. "How high?" He hesitated. "Your side." For the first time in years, she felt something colder than fear. Betrayal. If Victor was right, someone inside her own network was complicit. Someone feeding information to traffickers. Someone who had turned her missions into cover for profit. That night she recorded everything, voice notes, copies of data, encrypted names. She didn't trust anyone, not even the ones wearing her uniform. When she finally sat down, the fatigue hit her like a weight. Her reflection in the window didn't look like a soldier anymore. It looked like someone trying to remember why she still fought. Days turned into nights, meetings, surveillance, following money trails that led nowhere. until one file changed everything. It was buried in Dragovic's personal archives, an internal memo stamped with a familiar signature. Commander Chen. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. She read it again. The handwriting was similar, the code name matched, but the message, funds, coordinates, authorization, looked like an order. Her hands shook. Was it a forgery? A setup? Or something worse? For the first time in her career, Sarah didn't know who the enemy was. The next morning, she received a message from an unlisted number. Meet at the bridge, midnight, come alone. She went. Of course she went. The bridge was quiet, fog curling over the river. A man waited at the far end, face hidden beneath a hood. When he turned, she froze. It was Chen. It was one of his aides. He looked terrified. You weren't supposed to see that file. Then tell me what it means. He hesitated. Chen's covering for someone, a senator. There's a deal. Weapons, trafficking routes disguised as humanitarian aid. You dig deeper, you disappear. A shot cracked through the fog before he could finish. The aide crumpled. Sarah dove for cover, adrenaline flooding her veins. Another shot hit the concrete near her hand. She rolled, drew her weapon, scanned the rooftops. Nothing but rain and echoes. By the time she reached the aide, he was gone. In his hand was a flash drive. She pocketed it and vanished into the dark. Back in her hotel room, she plugged the drive into a secure laptop. Encrypted data scrolled across the screen: names, bank transfers, contracts, mission codes. And there it was again, Chen's authorization. But the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. The orders weren't his. They'd been forged using his credentials. Someone higher up was using his name to move funds through covert channels. She sat back, heart pounding. Relief, anger, confusion all at once. Whoever it was, they were inside the system. And now they knew she knew. As dawn broke over the city, she packed her gear. Victor called, voice tight. You're compromised, get out now. She hesitated. What about the people still trapped? Forget them, this isn't your fight anymore. Sarah's voice hardened. It's always my fight. She ended the call, grabbed the drive, and headed for the extraction point. She didn't know who was watching her, or what awaited her when she got home. But as she disappeared into the misty streets, one thought burned clear in her mind. Truth has enemies. But silence has accomplices. She didn't remember sleeping on the flight back. Just the engine's hum, the weight of the flash drive in her pocket, and the uneasy rhythm of her own heartbeat. Home wasn't supposed to feel like enemy territory. But as the base came into view through the small aircraft window, she realized something had changed. The checkpoints were tighter, the soldiers less familiar. Faces she didn't recognize scanned her ID, their eyes lingering too long. When she entered headquarters, the hallways were quiet, too quiet. Usually there was noise, laughter, footsteps, radios crackling. Now there was nothing but silence and the faint smell of disinfectant. Commander Chen's office door was closed. That never happened. She hesitated outside, then knocked once. Come in, his voice said. He looked tired, older. There were deep lines under his eyes, the kind that don't come from age but from knowing too much. Welcome back, he said. You've been busy. Sarah stayed standing. You know why. Enlighten me. She slid the flash drive across his desk. Found this in Bucharest. Someone's using your signature to authorize off-grid transfers, shipments, human cargo disguised as aid. He didn't touch it, just stared. I've seen it, he said quietly. Her stomach twisted. Then why didn't you say anything? Because it's bigger than me. That wasn't an answer, it was a warning. You're telling me our own chain of command is moving people like property, she said, her voice steady but shaking inside. And we're supposed to look away. Chen's jaw flexed. You think I haven't tried to stop it, I've been chasing ghosts for a year, Sarah. Every time I pull a thread, someone higher cuts the line. Senators, contractors, even intelligence liaisons. You expose it, you'll vanish before you reach the door. Sarah leaned closer. Then let me vanish, but not before I drag them into the light. For the first time, Chen looked afraid. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the training grounds. You've got courage, he said, but courage doesn't always win. Sometimes it just dies quietly. She watched him. The man who had once been her compass now sounded like a ghost of himself. Are you in on this? She asked finally. He turned slowly. If I was, you wouldn't be standing here. That night she couldn't sleep. Every noise sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like surveillance. She kept the drive hidden beneath the floor panel of her quarters, behind a metal casing only she knew how to remove. But paranoia had a pulse. At 200, she heard a faint click, the sound of a lock turning that shouldn't have. She was up instantly, sidearm drawn, eyes scanning the dark. The door opened halfway, a silhouette. Sarah, a whisper. Reed. What the hell are you doing here? Sarah hissed. The young soldier's face was pale, eyes wide. They're coming. MPs. They said you're under investigation for espionage. Sarah froze. Who told you? Everyone's talking about it. Commander Chen's been questioned too. It hit her like cold water. They weren't covering it up anymore. They were erasing it. Listen to me, Sarah said, grabbing Reed by the shoulders. If they ask where I went, you don't know, understand. Reed's lip trembled. Where are you going? Somewhere they can't follow. Sarah grabbed her go-bag, pre-packed, always ready. Weapon, cash, fake IDs, encrypted phone. She slipped into the hallway, moving fast, using the maintenance tunnels to reach the perimeter fence. The night air was sharp, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. As she crouched near the fence line, headlights swept across the sand, 2 Humvees approaching. She cut through the wire with a small blade, crawled out, and disappeared into the desert. By dawn, she was 30 miles out. Dust-covered, dehydrated, exhausted but free. She found an abandoned radio tower near the highway, climbed halfway up, and used her backup transmitter to send a coded message. Coordinates, request for secure contact. An hour later, a voice crackled through the static. Martinez, this is Ionescu. You've made quite the mess. Tell me something I don't know. You're officially flagged. They've frozen your assets. Travel, communication, all locked down. Who issued the warrant? Someone under the Defense Oversight Committee, a senator named Cole. Ring a bell. Sarah closed her eyes. Senator William Cole. She'd seen his name in the files. He's at the top, she said. He's protected, Ionescu replied. You can't take him down alone. Watch me. There was a pause, then his voice softened. You can't save everyone, Sarah. Sometimes survival is the fight. She smiled bitterly. Then I'm still fighting. Over the next few days, she moved like a ghost. Fake passports, sleeper safe houses, burned phones. Everywhere she went, she saw faces from her past, some familiar, some probably hunting her. But she wasn't hiding, she was gathering. Piece by piece, she traced the money trail from Cole's foundations to a private security firm in the Balkans, then to offshore accounts linked to U.S. defense contracts. The proof was solid, the evidence damning. All she needed was to get it out. But leaks didn't survive long in her world. One night in a safe house outside Naples, her encrypted phone buzzed. No ID, just one line of text. You're not the only one who wants this exposed. Dock 17, midnight. She arrived early, hidden beneath the hood of a gray jacket, pistol under her arm. The dock was empty, except for the sound of waves slapping against metal hulls. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. Commander Chen. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind filled the silence, carrying the scent of salt and diesel. I didn't betray you, he said finally. Then why am I running for my life? Because you got too close. She stepped closer, eyes narrowed. You knew Cole was behind it. I suspected. Suspected isn't good enough. Chen exhaled. You think this is new? These operations have existed for decades. We shut one down, two more take its place. You want justice. It doesn't live here anymore. Sarah stared at him, voice trembling. Then why did you teach me to fight for it? He looked away, because I thought it still could. A gunshot cracked the night. Sarah dropped instinctively, gun drawn. A second shot hit the water beside them. Sniper, Chen barked, shoving her behind a crate. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine roared to life. Move, he shouted. They sprinted down the dock, firing back toward the flash of muzzle light on the rooftops. Sarah dove behind a shipping container, returning fire with clean, practiced precision. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. When she looked back, Chen was down. Blood pooled beneath his shoulder. She crawled to him, pressing her hands against the wound. Stay with me. His breathing was shallow. They knew we'd meet. Someone's feeding them. Who? He coughed, eyes unfocused. Reed. Her heart stopped. No. She's not who you think, he whispered, planted before you met her. Sarah shook her head. She's just a recruit. She's intelligence, Cole's asset, keeps tabs on field units. The realization hit her like shrapnel. The quiet girl with the nervous smile, the one who'd looked up to her, it had all been an act. Chen's grip tightened weakly on her wrist. Don't trust anyone, Martinez. Not anymore. His hand fell away. Sarah froze, then forced herself to move. She checked his pulse. Nothing. Another mentor gone to silence. She left the dock before reinforcements arrived, her mind burning with betrayal and grief. Reed. The recruit she'd protected. The one she'd started to believe could change things. Had she been reporting on her all along, feeding every word, every move back to Cole's people? Sarah's chest tightened. Trust had always been rare. Now it was extinct. 2 days later, she found Reed. The young woman was in civilian clothes, walking through a crowded market in southern Spain. She looked smaller, almost fragile. Sarah followed quietly, then stepped into her path. Reed froze. Ma'am, I. Don't, Sarah said. Not another word. People brushed past them, unaware of the tension between predator and prey. Reed's eyes glistened. You don't understand. Then make me. Tears streaked down her cheeks. I didn't have a choice. They found out about my brother. They said they'd erase his record. I was just supposed to observe you, nothing else. Sarah's voice was cold, and when they framed me. I tried to warn you, Reed whispered. That night when I said they were coming, I thought it would buy you time. Sarah studied her, searching for a lie, and found none. You killed Chen, she said quietly. Reed's face crumpled. I didn't pull the trigger, but I told them where he'd be. Sarah closed her eyes, anger and sorrow crashing inside her like a storm. You think this ends with forgiveness, she said finally. Reed shook her head. No, but maybe it ends with truth. She handed Sarah a small device, a drive. Everything, Cole, the operations, the money. I copied it before they burned the system. Sarah took it slowly. Why give this to me? Because you'll do what I couldn't. Before Sarah could respond, Reed turned and disappeared into the crowd. That night, Sarah sat in a small hostel room overlooking the sea. The new drive glowed faintly in the light of her laptop. On the screen, names, contracts, wire transfers, evidence enough to bury half a government. But the truth wasn't free. Reed was on the run now. Chen was dead. And Sarah was already a ghost. She uploaded the files to multiple encrypted servers, routing them through 3 continents. One copy went to investigative journalists. another to international courts, the rest to the cloud, set to release if she disappeared. Then she powered down the laptop and sat in the quiet. The sea outside roared like a heartbeat, the kind that reminds you you're still alive, even when everything you've known is gone. By morning, the world would know her story, at least the part that mattered. The corruption, the betrayal, the faces behind the clean suits and patriotic speeches. They'd call her a traitor, a whistleblower, a hero. She didn't care which. As the first light broke across the horizon, Sarah whispered to no one and everyone at once. Some fights don't end with victory, they end with exposure. She slipped her dog tags into her pocket, zipped her jacket, and walked into the dawn. The war wasn't over, but it was no longer hidden. And that, she thought, was enough for now. They called her a traitor before the sun even rose. By the time Sarah crossed into Portugal under a false name, her face was already on every classified bulletin across 2 continents. The leaks had detonated like a bomb, not in a battlefield, but in boardrooms, Senate halls, and private bunkers. Headlines screamed, "Navy insider exposes trafficking ties." Officials denied everything. Anonymous sources confirmed it all. The internet devoured the story. But for Sarah, there was no triumph. Only silence. The kind that follows detonation, when the dust hasn't yet decided where to fall. She watched the news in a cafe full of strangers, her hood pulled low, her coffee untouched. On the screen, grainy footage showed the familiar face of Senator Cole, sweating under congressional lights. He called the leaks fabrications, foreign sabotage, the work of a rogue operative with delusions of justice. Sarah almost laughed. Delusions of justice. Maybe he was right. She switched off the screen and walked out. The streets of Lisbon were bright and loud, filled with tourists who smiled too easily, unaware that somewhere nearby stood a woman the world had chosen to forget. By nightfall, she was in hiding again. An abandoned apartment near the docks, peeling paint, broken balcony, a view of the Atlantic that reminded her of every deployment she'd ever survived. For days, she slept in short bursts, waking to every creak and shadow. Old habits don't die, they wait. Her mind replayed everything. Jen's last breath. Reed's trembling hands. The faces of the girls in that compound, the ones she couldn't save. Justice had cost her everything: rank, home, identity. She wasn't even sure who she was now. Some nights she sat on the floor with her back against the wall, whispering to herself like a prayer. You did the right thing, you did the right thing. But sometimes the silence whispered back, then why does it feel like loss? On the 4th night, a knock came. 3 taps, paused, 2 more. The signal. Sarah drew her pistol and moved quietly to the door. Who is it? A pause, then a familiar voice. It's Victor. She unlocked it slowly, keeping the gun low but ready. He stepped inside, dripping from rain, eyes darting. You've made history, he said softly. Or enemies, hard to tell which. Both, she said. He set a folder on the table. Cole, under investigation. Interpol froze his assets this morning. Half his partners have vanished. The leaks worked. Sarah stared at the folder, expression unreadable. And the other half. Still breathing, and they want you gone. He hesitated. There's talk about sending someone after you. Officially, you don't exist. Unofficially, you're a liability. Sarah looked out the window. Rain blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. I figured this day would come. Victor sat down. You can disappear, I can help you. New name, new passport, a quiet life in the Azores. No one will find you there. She smiled faintly. A quiet life doesn't suit ghosts. Ghosts can rest too, he said. Not yet. For the next week she stayed hidden, tracking the chaos her truth had unleashed. Military contracts suspended. Intelligence officers arrested. Cole resigned, his last public statement a trembling denial on national TV. And yet, for every door she'd forced open, two more closed in silence. The networks adapted. The machine kept running. One morning, she read an article online. Anonymous sources claimed the whistleblower behind the leaks, a former female operative, had died overseas. Her own obituary, complete with a photo from 5 years ago. She stared at the screen for a long time, then closed it. Maybe it was better that way. The dead don't have to run. That night she dreamed of water. Cold, endless, pulling her down. When she woke, her heart was racing. The room was dark except for the pale light of dawn leaking through the cracks. She reached for her weapon, then stopped. Something in the air felt still. Then she saw it. A small envelope slid under the door. Her pulse spiked. Inside, one line written in neat handwriting. "We know where Reed is." No signature, no seal. Sarah exhaled slowly. Reed, the recruit, the spy, the one who'd saved her with the final data drop. Was she alive? Or bait? The address led to Morocco. Tangier, a city built on whispers and trade winds. She arrived under a different passport, Elena Torres, journalist. The meeting spot was an old warehouse near the coast. The sun was sinking when she got there, painting the world in orange and rust. Inside, the air smelled of oil and salt. She heard footsteps. Reed stepped from the shadows. Alive, thinner, paler, but alive. Sarah froze. "You're a hard person to find." Reed gave a small, broken smile. "So are you." They stood in silence, two fugitives bound by choices neither could undo. Finally, Sarah said, "Why the message?" Reed's voice trembled. "Because they're still moving people. Cole's gone, but others took his place. I have proof. I just can't do it alone this time." Sarah studied her. The girl who had once betrayed her was now asking for her trust again. "You're asking me to walk back into the fire I just escaped," Sarah said quietly. Reed nodded. "Because you're the only one who still cares." That night they pored over data on a flickering laptop, shipment manifests, coded communications, satellite routes. It was worse than before. More organized, more hidden. The operation had simply changed hands. Sarah leaned back, rubbing her eyes. "You realize if we do this again, there's no coming back." Reed looked at her. "I stopped believing in coming back a long time ago." There was silence, and then Sarah said, "All right, one last time." Over the next days, they worked like ghosts. Disguises, travel, communication in dead drops and coded notes. Sarah felt the rhythm return, the old precision, the quiet control. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't for orders or medals. It was for redemption. They tracked the new network to a cargo hub on the Moroccan coast. An innocuous warehouse near the port, guarded by private contractors in plain clothes. Inside, containers marked relief supplies. Sarah watched from the cliffs through binoculars. Men loaded crates under floodlights. Every so often, a figure moved differently, slower, smaller. "Not crates, people." Her throat tightened. "Same sickness," she murmured, "different name." Reed crouched beside her. "We can record it, leak it again." Sarah nodded, "And this time they'll believe it." But before they could move, headlights flared behind them. A convoy. Armed men. "Down," Sarah hissed. Gunfire erupted. Sand exploded around them. They dove behind rocks, returning fire in bursts. Reed screamed, clutching her arm. Blood. Sarah dragged her behind a dune, heart pounding. "How did they find us?" Reed's voice was faint. "Maybe I never stopped being followed." Sarah's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped between cliffs and sea. There was only one way out. She grabbed Reed's radio beacon. The emergency signal synced to Victor's contact line and activated it. Then she handed Reed her weapon. "You cover me, I'll draw them out." Reed's eyes widened. "You'll die." "Not if they think I'm already dead." Before Reed could protest, Sarah sprinted into the open. Bullets sliced past her, chipping stone, shredding air. She fired back, controlled, deliberate, forcing the attackers to shift focus. She dove behind a rusted truck, reloaded and shot out a floodlight. Darkness swallowed the scene. The gunfire slowed. Voices shouted in confusion. A helicopter's faint thrum echoed from the distance. Reinforcements. Victor's signal. Sarah looked back toward the dunes. Reed was gone, evacuated. She smiled faintly, relief cutting through the pain in her shoulder. Then the world erupted. A blast threw her off her feet. Heat, sand, silence. For a moment everything disappeared. Sound, breath, thought. When she opened her eyes, the sky was on fire. Her body ached, ears ringing. But she was alive. Barely. She crawled toward the cliff edge, dragging herself up until she could see the ocean again, black, infinite, waiting. The helicopter circled overhead, searchlight sweeping. She raised a trembling hand. And then she saw them, the containers below, burning, the people inside running free. They were escaping. A sob escaped her throat, half laugh, half cry. They were free. Hours later, she woke in the med bay of a ship. Victor's voice somewhere nearby. "She'll live," a medic said. "Then she's done," Victor replied quietly. "No more missions." Sarah's lips twitched into a faint smile. "That's what you think," she thought. When Victor leaned over, she whispered, "Did they make it?" He nodded, "Every last one." She closed her eyes. "Then that's enough." Weeks later, in a small coastal town, a woman with short-cropped hair and a faint scar across her temple bought a coffee from a street vendor. No one knew her name. No one asked. She sat near the water, watching children play along the shore. The sun was rising, soft and gold, washing the past clean for just a moment. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a single dog tag, and dropped it into the tide. It sank slowly, disappearing beneath the waves. A new life waited somewhere beyond the horizon. But as she stood and walked away, one thought lingered, quiet, certain, unshakable. The truth doesn't need permission. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. And sometimes that's all the war ever was. Peace is a strange thing. You spend your life fighting for it, and when it finally arrives, it feels like an empty room. For Sarah, peace came quietly. No medals, no uniforms, no orders. Just a small apartment on the coast of southern Italy, with a view of the sea and a radio that only played old jazz. She lived under a new name, Elena Torres. The world still thought Sarah Martinez was dead, buried somewhere in the chaos she'd exposed. Maybe that was for the best. Some nights she'd stand on the balcony, the wind tangled in her hair, listening to the tide. The ocean had followed her everywhere, from the training beaches of Coronado to the silent harbors of Tangier. It had tested her, drowned her, cleansed her. Now it was the only thing that didn't ask for explanations. A year had passed since the leak. Cole was gone, imprisoned after a failed attempt to flee the country. Others weren't as lucky. Some vanished, others were quietly replaced. The network she'd helped destroy had left a scar on the world, but it had also sparked something unexpected: reform. Small, imperfect, but real. Nations began sharing intelligence more transparently. Whistleblower protections were rewritten. For once, truth had left a mark that couldn't be erased. But for Sarah, the world outside her walls didn't matter as much as the silence inside them. She woke at dawn, ran along the shoreline, fixed things that didn't need fixing. It was how she stayed alive: movement, purpose, even in stillness. Sometimes she'd stop by a small cafe near the harbor, where the owner, an old man named Luca, saved her the same table every morning. "Another cappuccino, signora," he'd ask with a grin. She'd smile faintly, make it strong. He didn't know who she really was. No one there did. To them, she was just a quiet woman who loved the sea and always tipped too much. One afternoon, while sorting old boxes, she found something she hadn't seen in years: her grandfather's dog tags. Rusty, scratched but still solid. She sat on the floor, running her thumb over the faded letters. Miguel A. Martinez. She remembered his stories, how he'd said dignity was the hardest armor to wear. And she realized something. He never told her to be a soldier. He'd told her to be human. Somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten that difference. That night the storm came. Wind tore through the streets, rain slashed against the windows. The power went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. Sarah lit a candle. Its flicker filled the room with soft, trembling gold. She poured herself a drink and sat by the window, watching lightning dance across the black horizon. Each flash brought back memories, faces, moments, ghosts. Chin's calm eyes. Reed's trembling apology. The children running free in the burning night. She whispered their names, one by one, like a roll call for the lost. The storm raged. And then from somewhere deep inside her, the tears came. For everything she'd done. Everything she couldn't. Everything she'd become to survive it. They weren't the tears of guilt anymore. They were release. When the candle finally went out, she whispered into the dark, "You can rest now." The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds like forgiveness. She went for a run along the cliffs. The air was sharp, clean, alive. Halfway down the path, she saw a man waiting near the rocks, hands in his pockets, wind tugging at his coat. It took her a moment to recognize him. "Victor." He smiled faintly as she approached. "You really don't know how to stay hidden." Sarah stopped a few feet away. "You found me." "I wasn't looking, the sea told me." She laughed, the first real laugh in months. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "A little vacation, a little checking up on old ghosts." He handed her an envelope. "Something came for you." She frowned, opening it. Inside was a single photograph. Reed standing in a refugee camp somewhere in Greece, smiling, alive. On the back, a note in handwriting she recognized. "You were right, the fight was worth it." Sarah's throat tightened. "She's working for the UN now," Victor said. "Helps displaced families. She said she owed you that much." Sarah looked at the photo again, a slow smile forming. "She doesn't owe me anything." Victor studied her for a long moment. "You did something rare, Sarah. You changed the system without letting it change you." She shook her head. "No, it changed me plenty. But it didn't break you." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she walked back to the shore, the place where land ends and memory begins. She carried two things: her grandfather's dog tags and the small bronze medal from years ago, the one that had once felt too small for its meaning. She crouched by the water, the waves licking at her boots. "For you," she whispered, holding both in her hands. "For every name they'll never remember." She threw them into the surf. They vanished beneath the foam, two tiny flashes of light swallowed by the sea. For a long time she stood there, letting the wind wash over her, her heart strangely calm. Months passed. The world moved on. New wars, new scandals. The story of the rogue SEAL operative faded from headlines. But sometimes, in dark corners of the internet, in quiet military forums, someone would mention her, the nameless woman who'd exposed everything and disappeared. Some called her a myth. Some called her a traitor. Some called her the Navy ghost. But none of them knew that somewhere far away, She was still alive, still watching, still listening, still believing in something simple. That truth, once freed, never dies. One morning, Luca handed her a small radio when she came for coffee. "For you," he said. "Old, but it works." She took it home, tuned it absently, static, then music. Then a voice. Not a broadcast, a message. Scrambled, faint. "If anyone still believes, we keep going always." Her pulse quickened. It was Reed. She smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "Always," she whispered back. The world could stay broken. It wasn't her job to fix it anymore. But maybe it was her job to remember how to live in it. That night she walked along the pier, lanterns glowing like stars reflected on the water. Children laughed somewhere behind her. Boats creaked against the tide. The sky stretched wide and endless. And for the first time in years, she felt no weight on her shoulders. She was no longer the soldier, the ghost, the secret. She was just Sarah. She closed her eyes, let the wind brush her face, and breathed deeply. Peace wasn't silence, she realized. It was acceptance. It was knowing the world would never be perfect, and loving it anyway. She turned back toward the lights of the town, her steps slow, unhurried. In her mind she could still hear her grandfather's voice, calm, patient, proud. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak," he'd said once. "It simply acts." She smiled softly. "Yeah," she whispered, "I finally understand." And with that, she disappeared into the glow of the night. Not as a ghost, not as a soldier, but as a woman who had finally found her peace. The sea behind her shimmered like glass. The wind carried her story away, across the waves, to wherever courage still had a home. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.